G'day everyone, welcome to Brushes with Beck, an art channel where I share drawing and painting videos along with tips and how-tos. This video is a time-lapse of a coloured pencil drawing of a cheetah. The paper that I'm using today is Canson Miton's paper, which is a pastel paper. I'm using the reverse side of the paper. This is one of their cool tone papers, but to me it does have a bit of a warm hue. Maybe I'm wrong about that, it just seems that way. For this drawing I'm using both Faber-Castell Polychromos coloured pencils and the Derwent drawing pencils. Now you can see my sketch is mostly of just the head. There's not much else to it, as this is only an A5 piece, which is about 6 by 8 inches, so it's quite small. And I've just started by lightly indicating the highlights around the edge of the cheetah. That's because the reference photo that I'm using is actually backlit. And so what you'll notice in this piece is that when I've started it, I've actually started it incorrectly. Or at least in my mind and with my process, I've started it incorrectly. But I didn't realize it at the time. This piece was actually a really good learning piece for me as well, because I realized my mistakes and I was able to correct them along the way, which is really, really important to work through mistakes. I thought that creative process would be really good to share with you guys in terms of the mistakes that I made and how I went about correcting them. So here I am drawing what I think I see, in terms of what I think a cheetah is supposed to look like, instead of drawing what I actually see in my reference photo. Now the mistake that I'm making here is that I'm laying in a lot of lighter sort of sandy colours and that sort of thing, for the cheetah's fur. But in my photo, it's not like that at all. I only think I'm seeing those colours because that's the colours that I know a cheetah is. I've seen cheetahs before. And that's part of learning to see colours properly in your reference and learning to draw what you see and not what you think you see. The mind is very good at playing tricks on us and filling in the blanks. Because the cheetah is so backlit in my reference photo, I should have started with a base layer of blue or something similar to get those shadows in. But even just looking at my reference photo, my brain goes, no, that cheetah is sandy brown coloured. But no, that's wrong. So as I move through this piece, you will actually notice that my process changes. So early on, I laid in the eyes to try to ground the piece and give myself a point of reference for values, the highlights and the shadows. But when I came back to this piece at this stage, I realized that I had to make it a lot darker yet, even though I had those underlayers in. It was at this point that I added in a number of darker browns, some of those reddish browns and dark muted browns, and that really helped. I layered them quite a lot and added a bit of defined texture to the fur. So at that point, I thought I was doing quite well. I'd darkened up my image and defined some shadowed areas more, and it was improving, coming more towards the darker backlit look that I needed. Or at least I thought it was. And I really did think it was coming together. And it does look quite good. And that was until I added in the really heavy darks. I started to add in the eyebrow markings, darker areas on the face, and when I finally got to adding in the tear marking with the solid black like it is in my reference photo, along with the nose, which is also nearly solid black, I did lots of work on the nose, getting some colour in, blending it out, making it a nice rich black while maintaining the rim highlights. And that's where I left it for the day, which I'm really, really glad about. The next day I was actually at work thinking about this piece while I was there, and I realized it wasn't anywhere near dark enough and that I really needed to push those shadows more with blue, because at this point I hadn't used any blue, and blue can really make for some nice deep shadows. And you can see the first pencil I'm using is a dark blue. I'm trying to lay in some fur texture with that blue pencil, trying to start darkening up those areas even more, and even glazing in some spots to emphasize that deep shadowed look. Otherwise, it doesn't look too much like it's in shadow, more that it's just a dark brown. And so this step really, really helped with that. But I felt as a result the face ended up a little bit messy, simply because in the end I think I overworked it. I didn't have the correct base colours down, so having to go in over my fur texture with blue to darken it all up and add more fur texture, it just didn't quite work out as nicely as opposed to if I had layered my colours correctly for what I was seeing in my reference photo. So it wasn't 100% how I wanted, but I certainly saved it from being much worse than what it would have been because I got my values more accurate. You can see that it has made the black tear marks and nose fit in much nicer because the face itself is darker as well. So the values are starting to line up. When I've moved down to the cheetah's chest area, I've actually started out with a blue colour rather than a grey or an off-white cream like I might usually do. So blue is really very crucial to making that feel like it's in quite deep shadow. I went quite dark on a lot of these white areas, and this was a really important learning step for me because I haven't done a lot of white fur up until this point. So this fur doesn't look white at all in my reference photo, only around the rim of the cheetah's side where those highlights are that I've already mapped in. So I found a lot of colour in these whites, and I was just determined to get as much of that in as possible and really push it as dark as I could without getting too close to the colour of the face, because I wanted it to be obvious that this was white fur and the face wasn't white fur. So I still had to keep that distinction while keeping it quite dark so that it looked like it was backlit and in shadow. And I think in the end I managed to pull that off pretty well. So once again, I'm just building up layers, and I'm actually building up dark to light in a lot of these layers, and that's actually because I'm using the Canson Mitence paper. I find that it's very forgiving in terms of layering, especially with the Derwent drawing pencils. I can layer light colours over some darker ones, although I do try and obviously preserve my highlights and work around my light areas. It's still possible to use lighter colours over dark on this paper, which is a real benefit. Now just moving on to the back and shoulder area of the cheetah, you can see I've started with the light blue and a much darker blue as well to really push the shadows in that area. As soon as I laid in those blues that dark, I think it made a huge difference and really highlighted to me how important it was to layer those blues in first. Over the top of that, I layered in some browns, and then I went in with a polychromos white, which is fairly translucent, just so I could map out the lighter areas in that section and give myself a bit of definition in where I was working and what I was doing. Give myself some direction to work in. So I just wanted to quickly add that this cheetah that I'm drawing is a cheetah that I photographed at Minato Zoo about probably at least 12 years ago now. He was part of the ambassador program where you could meet the cheetah, and we actually, did that experience the one day that I took this photograph. And once again, Jasiri walks over my art. Typical cat, but at least she didn't step on it this time. I'm just starting to move into those darker colours and actual fur strokes, as opposed to just blending layers. When you see me blending those layers, I'm just using a cotton bud. It's dry blending. I'm not using any solvents or anything like that. I'm not even sure if solvents would work on this paper. It is quite a lightweight paper, but I do find that dry blending with a cotton bud works very well on Canson Mitence for coloured pencil. You do pull up some of the colours, but you can just lay some colour back down over the top a little bit to strengthen it back up again. So as I said, just working in all those different fur tones, adding in some more dark blue just to really push those shadows a bit in the areas where I think it needs it. But also trying to warm it up a little, because cheetahs do have a warm fur colour there and it is darker than the cheetah's throat and belly, and I really do need to make sure that I indicate that in this piece. Once I'm satisfied with that, you can see I've moved on to the spots. And I'm actually going in with a base layer of blue for the spots just to try and tie in the whole picture together a bit better. Rather than just laying straight black fur in for all those spots, which could seem a little out of place. That's what I did with the facial tear stripes. They're very bold, but they look a little bit more tacked on because I haven't done the proper base layers there. I've also then gone over with a dark brown there too, just to give those spots a little bit of warmth before going over them with the black pencil. With the black pencil, I'm being more refined, more particular about my pencil strokes and the strands of the fur, just to really try and make sure they look correct. Because even though the spots just look like little lopsided circles and things, there's more to it than just that. I followed the pattern of the cheetah's spots from my reference photo probably 95% accurately in terms of the number of and placement of spots. Now I'm really just trying to pay attention to how the fur lays over those spots, just to make sure it feels like they're part of the fur. Just refining a few details, highlighting those whiskers again, pumping the highlights a little bit, little details here and there. The same with the black pencil, adding in some whiskers because the cheetah has both black and white whiskers, and refining more details. Thank you very much for watching. I do hope you enjoyed this video and have been able to take something away from it. Like I said earlier on, it's important to learn how to draw what you see, not what you think you see. The brain fills in a lot of information for us based on prior knowledge, so seeing past that can be tricky. If you liked the video, please give it a thumbs up, comment down below and subscribe to my channel. I upload new art videos every single week. You can also find me on Instagram at brusheswithbeck. See you next week for another video. Bye! Why am I waving?